did you guys move to LA officially? How long has it been since you've been out there?
So February 15th, 2022 was when we officially moved. And we had been 2018, 2019, and 2021 prior to that.
Oh, you were already like visiting LA in those years?
That's right. Yeah, we came over for like writing sessions and that kind of stuff for about like 3 or 4 weeks at a time. And then when we got kind of, stuck here mid-pandemic in 2021, stranded in Nashville, we were going through a record deal with Ultra Records at the time, part of Sony, and that allowed us to make the move over here permanently back in February of last year. So we're still pretty new to the States.
Right. Had you been over much before the move? Like, how much of a culture shock is it still to be living out here?
Yeah, I think Aaron had been maybe a handful of times prior to like the more music-focused trips that we've been on. So 2018, I'm pretty sure we initially came out here. I think we did like one session with someone here.
Yeah.
And then 2019, we came with more intention to just write the entire time. So we came out in June for a full month and we wrote every weekday. I remember we were having weekends off, and Monday to Friday, we just wrote and had sessions with whoever, wherever. We based ourselves in LA. And then the plan was to kind of save up and move here. And that led us to 2021. We, at that point in time, we had then formed a partnership with our now manager, Harrison, and he had some opportunities for us to play in New York and Chicago and LA and Charlotte and just a sort of handful of like these sort of main markets in America. And we did the shows. We got to play at Brooklyn Mirage in front of, I think, like 6,000 people. It was really strange, like coming from the pandemic in Sydney where like, there's nowhere to play. And then America's already opening and we're just like thrust in front of all these people. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily a culture shock per se, but maybe a career shock, if that's a term.
Well, sure. I mean, it makes me think what you're talking about is like so work focused. And it sounds like at least those initial visits, you were really trying to, get the most out of every day and get the work done while you were here. So then I guess my question is, once you moved and there's extra time, you don't have to just wring every little bit of work out of every single day. To me, that's when I feel like the culture weirdness would maybe come in of like, well, what do I do in my free time? This is because I've spent some time in Sydney and it's not a crazy difference, but I mean, it does feel like a different place with different people to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's we haven't had that much time, to be honest, on the ground. Like since we kind of moved here, we got thrust, we signed with CAA, we got thrust to do all these shows, which has been great. So we've seen, plenty of America in the short space of time we've been here. And then the times that we kind of like, when you're traveling interstate, doing your shows, coming back, you need a couple of days just to kind of catch up and regroup and rest. And then you're back to the studio, prepping the next song, prepping the next single. So there hasn't been that much time to be like, okay, let's go out and explore more of, America or do that kind of stuff. It's just literally work. So we're trying to be a bit more intentful in terms of, okay, then making sure that we schedule some time in for mental health and rest and recuperation. But, a lot of it is just hitting the kind of ground running, making our mark in the US. And, that's the reason why we moved here. It was never going to be a holiday. It was like, we're moving here for career intentions. We're here to hit the ground running. We're here just to make the most of opportunity. So,
yeah. And so much can happen in America in a short space of time. Whereas like, you can go away for a month in America and get done what it would take you like 6 months in Australia. So the pace is a lot faster here or LA.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, are you at least, it sounds like still having fun with that crazy pace? Because I mean, if you like working and you're enjoying the fact that all of a sudden you can get so much more done in a shorter period of time, then that makes total sense to me too, because I think a lot of people in this line of work have trouble taking vacations anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because like there's in Australia, I think Cam and I, we only had a couple of shows. Like we supported Hayden James on one of his kind of album tours or whatever it was. Australia is such a small market in terms of the landscape. There's a handful of festivals, and usually how it kind of works is because, you know, we used to work in that space in terms of booking talent. It's kind of like they'll have their stock standard UK overseas artists out there, and they'll supplement it with Australian artists, but it's usually the same regurgitated lineup, unfortunately. So there's not much opportunity. And so for us, we were just making music and not doing any shows. So that was the focus. Since we moved over to the States, it's like, now we're doing shows. Okay, shit, what does the show actually look like? How do we upgrade it? How do we put, you know, so now it becomes like there's all these assets. So we have like our live show, which is the full live show when, you know, Cam's singing, I'm singing backing vocals. I've got SPD, I've got some trigger pads. And then we do a DJ set, and our DJ set is us doing vocals too. And then there's a normal DJ set. So there's all these different facets that we've had to grow, develop, execute, and we're still learning what's the kind of best way. So that's where the time gets a little bit smaller, because you need to do all of that, then rehearse for the shows, performance, go to these shows, and then still make music, you know? So it's busy.
Yeah. It is a little crazy. I think the fun lies in the novelty of being able to visit a different state pretty much every week, you know, a new city, making new friends and all of that. So that keeps it fresh and exciting. Yes, it does, you know, start to feel a little bit more like work. But, you know, this is something that we've both been dreaming of for, you know, decades, you know. So
no, of course.
You wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Without question. And both of you came from solo projects or other projects before Night Tales, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Would you, like, what was the level of busyness or success or whatever you want to call it? Like, were any of those projects a thing before Night Tales, like in a serious career kind of way?
Yeah, I was part of a duo called Olympic Airs. We were signed to a domestic agent in Australia. We had two Australian tours. We had a couple of good syncs on 13 Reasons Why and FIFA 14. This is going back 10 years ago. You know, to date, I think we've got about 35 million streams or so. So that was doing really well in its own right. My music partner at the time, he developed a chronic illness and just decided that, you know, music wasn't for him at the time. And then my solo project started, which have had some good success on that as well, but not so much on the live front. But at the time when I was in Olympic Airs, I was working in a call center from Monday to Friday, and I was able to just, you know, if we did have gigs, you know, in a different state, I was able to go to. But it was, nowhere near as sort of like the level that sort of Night Tales is, you know. It was a lot more time. Yeah.
It's so funny the way timing plays into all of this too, because I'm sure, I mean, both of you, I can tell immediately you're serious guys. You're serious about what you're doing, talented musicians. And so I'm sure you treated all prior projects with that level of seriousness and care. You know what I mean? But then it is interesting how sometimes when you make that decision, whether it's yours or whether, you know, your partner had to move on because of an illness, blah, blah, blah. But whatever the reason, sometimes just that new start, that new perspective, the new way to look at your musical ideas, for lack of a better term, it's odd how that can just give it that energy, that extra boost. Like, I feel like there's something intangible too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's weird when you pivot like that. And we use our friend Hayden James, for example. So he was in a group called Hey Now. His first iteration was him with another guy called Andrew Rose. That lasted maybe a couple of years. And then he was part of this collective called Susumi DJs. So Sumi DJs, because I used to put them quite a lot. And that was actually Hayden James, Alice in Wonderland, Joyride as a kind of a collective. And then he went into a group called Cadillac, which was kind of like funk, you know, that kind of stuff. And then he went, okay, I'm just going to do my Hayden James solo project. And that kind of went off. And I feel this is probably what's happened with kind of Night Tales. Like, we both had, obviously, as you spoke about, respective projects, and they never got to the stage where we had to do shows and that kind of stuff. So you just focus on just doing the music and the craft. But I think all those steps helped us then, formulate Night Tales, and that being the perfect kind of formula to take us to, this next level. Do you know what I mean? I've personally I think I've done maybe 1 or 2 shows on my respective projects, but this has just been a juggernaut and a beast, and I'm just loving where it's evolving to.
Because we kind of arrived here naturally, it's probably worth telling the story of how you guys knew each other before the project and how you decided to form it. But right before I ask that, just because I'm curious, is there anything from your prior projects that you learned that you were able to kind of apply to Night Tales? Experiences you may have had, things you did right or wrong that you think has helped you in the new project?
Yeah, for sure. With Olympic Airs, Nathan, who I was writing with at the time, he interned a lot at like Modular and Future Classic, all these really great indie labels. And he had like the blueprint for, how business should be structured when it comes to music. Like, I never would think that those two things go hand in hand, but you do have to kind of see it that way. So even just little things like forming partnership agreements, creating band bank accounts, like the more sort of admin-y, boring stuff, but really necessary. Accounting, that it's that type of stuff that I've felt more confident with the next time around.
Yeah, from the jump, definitely. Like before Cam and I, got into actually making any music, we just had a partner agreement from the jump. Like, you know what I mean? Just protecting ourselves. It was like 50-50, boom, that's out the way. The business is done. Now we can talk about the music. But as this project evolves, you pick up, new skill sets, because even though our team is great, we also have a record label now with Empire being fantastic. And we have, Prime Artist Management with Harrison as our manager, and then the wider group, Prime Social Group. But there's still so many things like, booking flights and accommodation, which is usually done by your tour manager. Sometimes we have to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. And as Cam said, there's the accounting side of everything else. And now we move over to the States. It's like Australian taxation, American taxation, all this kind of stuff, and it's a massive minefield. But then we just released our debut album released last year called Proof on Ultra Records, and this is our 1-year anniversary. So we've got limited edition vinyl that went on pre-sale today, and just setting up things like Shopify and that kind of stuff, what I mean, has proven to be, a tricky situation. So you're learning all these things as you grow, and, we're looking to launch merch next year. So you have to become like really entrepreneurial in terms of like, there's the creative part, which wouldn't exist without that. But then there's always other shit that you have to do. And I think there's no way of escaping that until you get to a point where you have enough financial money to then employ people to do that for you. You still be across all the meetings and that kind of stuff, but physically you don't have to do the admin. Where we're at right now, even though we're growing that way, we're still having to pick up some of the admin stuff.
It's one of those funny things, because somebody listening is just like, oh, you have to book a flight. What's the big deal? But it's hard to make somebody understand when it's like, no, I have to book like 30 flights, and I have to, like, that'll take half your day,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those crazy things.
And when we play live at festivals or any kind of live show, then you bring your manager, you bring your tour manager, you're paying for them, you're paying for their time, you're paying for their flights, you're paying for their accommodation, all those things you have to kind of coordinate and everything else. So it becomes like, a cost management exercise and all that kind of stuff. You have to like have your fingers across and eyes across everything, because otherwise you get yourself into a financial hole if you're not doing things right.
Well, that's the whole thing too. Yeah, the idea of handing it off is of course very alluring, but even then, once you get to that point, it's like, oh shit, I still have to make sure everybody is doing this correctly. It's the same as like, the way that you can't hand off your music for somebody else to make. It's the same with any other creative decision, from artwork to presentation to all of that, man. It's cool that you're at that point. I mean, it is a fun point. And since we were talking about it, since I mentioned it, how did you come to start Night Tales? Like, had you guys known each other for a while before you decided to start the project?
I'll let Cam take this one.
Please.
Yeah. So yeah, as I mentioned, I was in the duo Olympic Airs, and Aaron had his solo project called Third Floor, and we were on the same. We were booked with the same domestic agent, Under Control. And there's a guy called Paul Sticks who heads that operation, and he's like, you know what? I think you two should, write some music together.
That's Cam's best impression of a UK accent. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think And so Aaron sent me some stuff, and to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the initial stuff. I was just kind of like,
He politely said no. There was probably like, we're on a podcast and we can't, use swear words, but it's
you
pretty
can
much
use swear words. You can absolutely use swear words.
But no, he sent me this one track, and I was like, oh yeah, I could see how that could be, something else. And that's when we first created the song Move You, which ended up being our debut single, which subsequently we signed with Majestic Casual. And that kind of formed the basis of Night Tales, the style that and the genre that was in. It was like kind of like dance with like a little hint of disco and deep house, and just kind of all of our favorite house dance centric influences.
Well, and so, those influences, I mean, if we keep working back a little bit, I'm curious for you guys, how did, if we go actually way back, like when you were kids or maybe teenagers, how did dance music find you? How did you find dance music? Do you have early memories of something you heard or a show you went to, or maybe something someone played for you that really flicked a switch on in your brain?
Yeah, for me, it was definitely, I kind of grew up on like, Motown, Atlantic Soul, reggae, Bob Marley, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until my teenage years I got into kind of like rap music, NWA, Public Enemy, all that kind of stuff. But probably shouldn't say this live, but I actually went to Ibiza with a group of mates at 15 years of age. Don't know how he managed to get on the plane or anything, but it's the first time I ever heard house music like properly. And I don't know if it's still there anymore. It might be, but there used to be a big club in Ibiza called Manumission. It was like a 10,000 capacity club, and it was crazy. And there was a group called Faithless, and the female DJ Sister Bliss was playing this music, and I usually danced to most shit. I just stood next to this massive fucking speaker going, what is this music? Like, what is it? It's just like, it's making me have all these different like feelings and stuff. And literally after that holiday, I bought my first pair of decks, Technics 1210s, belt drive, all that kind of stuff, and started to collect all this vinyl, and just really got into electronic music. And I've loved it since then.
Was it the kind of thing where you were sort of the one person with this like serious interest? Did you have a group of friends, or were you like the one weird kid who just loved this sort of niche thing?
Well, now it's kind of like, I'm going to say this politically correct as much as I can. So where I'm from in the UK, in my particular seat at the time, there's not many black people or mixed race people. I was probably one of a very few. All my other friends were white, so that's the music they really liked. Right. And it was our first boys' holiday together. So they were like, "Oh, we're going to go to Ibiza." I was like, "Yeah, sure, I don't care where we go." And then I realized, oh shit, I know why you like this music now. This music's fucking cool. Do you know what I mean? So, and then we all kind of shared our love for it, because in the UK, I'm not quite sure. Australia's probably not the same, but in the UK, there's a term, and we called it clubbing. And that means you're going to nightclubs to see DJs perform. And that was like a whole kind of culture movement in itself in the UK. So you'll go all around the UK and see these amazing DJs play all this stuff, and you just literally go there to see them and the music. And so we kind of did that a lot with our friendship group.
Right. So it was just kind of part of the friendship the relationships, the culture of it. And the
Exactly.
UK, I mean, you guys, you professionalized clubbing, right? Like that's the cultural exchange from America's, house music born here. But then once the UK got a hold of it, that's really when it turned into what we know now as house music. And I've always
you've got
been
all those
jealous
like
of
amazing
that.
clubs like Hacienda, Back to Basics. What's the one? Turnstiles in London, Fabric. All these like places, Gatecrasher. They were like the mecca of house music and club music. And then I think Europe started to kind of rotate it on, like Germany, Berlin, all that kind of stuff, made their own kind of culture, but it was based on the back of, how UK were making it, a proper cultural movement.
Yeah, yeah. And did you start playing out pretty quickly once you got decks, even at like house parties or, little bars, anything like that?
No, I literally I was a bedroom DJ for years and years and years until I moved to Australia. And I remember it was my first New Year's Eve in Australia, and this house party, and this guy had some vinyl. And he was DJing all night, and he was knackered. And he goes, "Anyone want to jump on?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can do this. I got vinyl." I just smashed this house party. And then weirdly, there was a guy there who owned a club called Ruby Rabbits in Australia. And then the next week, that was my very first gig there. And then literally my kind of like, I guess, DJing career took off in Australia. And I DJed for like best part of 15 years, 16 years I was there.
And that's wild. That must have felt validating, though, for being sort of an enthusiast, but not really putting yourself out there in that way for years beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely helped with music a lot, because you learn the style, or I guess the formula of, how certain songs are. So, when I'm kind of producing, I always have that in mind. Like, what would I do in this transition? What would I do here? How is this kind of like spaced out? You're still always learning, and there's no like real blueprint, but having all those years of DJing and listening to lots of music, it's definitely helped.
It's huge, man, because not only, I'm sure for, producing, obviously there's connections. And I think for the live show too, at least for me, it's like it helps you understand not only how to sort of set up the flow of a live set, but even just to be reactive to a crowd, to understand, how the energy exchange between a performer and a crowd works, all that sort of, again, intangible stuff that, there's something to it. It's a funny thing, again, because I think DJing, especially in 2023, it's not that hard to be like an okay DJ,
Mm-hmm.
but just there's something, if you really work at a little bit, get some gigs under your belt, man, it will make you such a better artist sort of all around, I think.
Yeah. I'll always forgive all like any technical mishaps. Like, if the song's too loud, or you're skipping a beat and you can't beat match and stuff, if the song selection is good. You know what I'm saying?
Dude.
Like, I think that's probably the most important thing for me anyway.
Yeah. And for you, I didn't mean to sideline you on that discussion, man.
Mm-hmm.
How did dance music come into your life?
Oh, yeah. Like growing up, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I would always hear like the more like pop classics, like Lady Mojo and like Sing Hallelujah and What Is Love and Music Sounds Better, like, all that type of stuff that kind of hit the top of the pops. And I always consider them like really infectious dance, like, happy songs. That was my perception of house music or dance music, just happy songs. And then didn't really care for it much until I hit the age of 16, and like some of my friends in high school had fake IDs and they were going out clubbing and stuff. And for my 17th birthday, I was desperate to go clubbing. So I asked my mum if I could get a fake ID, and she reluctantly agreed to buy me one for like $80 and got a fakie, because I was just really like passionate about wanting to learn to DJ and stuff like that.
You can buy fake IDs readily available.
Yes.
Holy shit.
But I can't believe you. Damn. That's a great mom, where not only can you be like, you tell her you want a fake ID, but she actually gets it for. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is in retrospect. But then my first club that I DJ'd, I'm just trying to think, Moulin Rouge, which wasn't too far from Ruby Rabbits. Now that I think about it. Trash Bags, all these like kind of like French electro scenes, like Justice, Busy P, Boys Noise, all that type of stuff. That was my first sort of like entry point into like really loving dance music, and used to go to all the house parties and play that type of music. And I knew people didn't want to hear it, but I was just so passionate about it. I was just like, nope, you're hearing this tonight, and that's it, you know?
Yeah.
But I quickly learned quickly learned later on as I continued to DJ that, you know, it's not always about me, you know? And then intertwined with that was a bit of production and learning on Fruity Loops and things like that. But the first sort of like, serious role with like making music was actually a band. So I kind of left the DJ electronic production side behind a little bit and went into band mode for the next 6-7 years.
What kind of band? Because I mean, Australia, especially in that era of like late 2000s, early 2010s, Australia has a crazy pedigree of, you know, those indie electronic crossover bands from that era.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was, indie electronic crossover. So really inspired by like Foals and Phoenix and just that whole era of music.
Man, I love that. And was that, you guys mentioned, you know, King's Cross, which is kind of that legendary area of town in Sydney where so many Australian names kind of came up, and a lot of people we still reference to this day. And that whole scene, were you guys in it? Like, you know, you were talking about the Hayden James and the Alice in Wonderlands, who used to be like the door girl at what's that spot? Candy's.
Candy's apartment.
Yeah, Candy's apartment. Well, so before I started, I still DJ, but I used to basically work for a hospitality chain called Keystone. So I was the entertainment director across the group. So my role was to basically, you know, not only kind of program the music that you would hear in the bars or nightclubs before entertainment came on, it was then booking the DJs, doing the events and that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of weird. It's weird for me now being on the other side of it, because if I look at all of the guys that I've given DJ gigs to, like Hugo and James from Flight Facilities, gave them their first gigs in the loft on the clubs I used to run. Oh, wow. The same as there was a club called Kick Caboodle in the Cross, and we used to have Falcona Fridays, and Alice in Wonderland would headline once a month, and Hayden James and all that kind of stuff. And then Setmo, another Australian band. So it's kind of weird, like being on the other side of it now, being a kind of artist myself. But I was kind of very deep into that scene at the time, not from like an artist standpoint, but just obviously connecting with the artists, making sure that, you know, our venues had the best entertainment around compared to everybody else, and then forging those relationships with those artists as well and all that kind of stuff. So
that's interesting too, man. I mean, were you, in the back of your head, did you always know that you wanted to be on the performer side, or was it more of a, you know, slower kind of evolution?
Do you know what? It was like DJing became, I used to DJ a lot, like in my kind of heyday. Like Friday, for example, would be me working pretty much 9 to 5 at the Keystone job. And then I'll go and DJ at one place called Cargo Bar from 5 till 8. Then I run down the road and DJ at my other club, Bungalow, from 8:30 to 11. Then run over to this like flagship premiere club called the Ivy. I used to do 11 till 2 and then go to the Cross and do 2 till 5. Yeah. I did that for fucking years, and I'd never want to do it again, because like I get knackered after doing one DJ set now. But yeah, it was funny. And it wasn't until there's a very famous group called Prodigy, which you've probably all heard of. The main guy, Liam, who makes all the music, is actually from the next kind of city along. And I've seen them a few times, but they came over to Sydney. And I think I was 34, 35, I can't remember when it was. It's like 10 years ago, whatever shit it was. And I saw them play, and I had this epiphany moment. I was like in the mosh, like when they're playing like Firestarter or something. Yeah. And I was just like, I want to do that. And literally the very next week I went to work and said, hey, I want to pursue this. I can pretty much do my job with my eyes closed, but I want Mondays off and I want Fridays off, and I'm just going to dedicate it to music. And they were like, yep, boom, and then never look back.
That's great, man. I mean, yeah, that's such a cool moment. And you tell me if I'm reaching too far on this one, but that makes me think of what you guys do now is such an interesting hybrid of different sounds and styles. And do you think it was anything about, because the Prodigy, obviously another hybrid group, it's like part dance music, part like rock music, part, there's a few different punk, there's a bunch of different stuff in there. Yeah. Do you think it was sort of seeing like that mix of things, like a little out of the box kind of thing?
Nah, for me,
I always feel like that type of music where they're pulling different genres together will always create the most original sound. People can't really put their finger on what it is. And they might hear the influence, but not actually know where it's from as well, because it's been morphed into something new,
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was more kind of like, DJing for all that time and playing, there were certain songs that that would get a crowd reaction, right? But then to see them playing their own original music and everyone going fucking crazy to it, I'm like, that must be a whole new experience, you know what I mean? So, yeah. And just the performing side of it, like, when I was DJing in these clubs, you're DJing sometimes between 5,000 and 10,000 people. So I got accustomed to just, being able to be in front of people. So that's why now when we go and perform, because we've DJed for so long and had experience, it's become second nature and we actually really enjoy it. Like, you know what I mean? Just going there and performing your own shit. And like I say, it's the live show constantly evolves as we're getting more experience on the ground, playing festivals and knowing how to interact with the crowd. And yeah, it's been great. Like I say, all these things that have in mine and Cam's lives has led up to this point. It's all these like little nuggets of experience that we've incorporated into Night Tales.
Well, so on that note, this is something I wrote down I wanted to ask you guys about. So, I was reading old interviews, listening to a bunch of your music earlier this morning when I knew we were coming to talk. And a lot of what's written about you guys talks about emotion as being sort of like a core tenet of what you do, that, you're trying to put emotion into music, trying to get people to feel something, trying to convey specific emotions, sort of regardless of what the song sounds like. And that's, I think, we can all understand that concept, but I love, kind of on a nerdy tip, this is something I always love trying to figure out. How do you actually imbue a piece of music with emotion, right? Like, and there isn't a precise answer for this. You don't have to have, like a super technical answer, but I always just nerd out about this kind of thing because we all know the feeling of listening to a song and feeling something really deeply. And as musicians, we know the idea of, you write a song and you can tell it's kind of special, or you can tell it really nailed what you were thinking about. Have you figured out any particular tips or tricks in your own creative process as far as like actually translating something as ephemeral as emotion into a piece of music?
Yeah, I think you got to tap in and you got to be really honest with yourself and you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And if it's a collaborative thing, then everyone else has to be in a spot where they're comfortable enough to share certain things, because the song could be about, X, Y, and Z. And I'm sure everyone in the room that's kind of writing together has that similar experience. But you also have to, create a space that people are comfortable enough to kind of share that. And allow those honest emotions to filter through into the music. And then when they're heard by the audience can usually tell pretty quickly, whether it's real or not. So you have to kind of get into those spaces and allow that to surface.
Yeah, my process was different because Cam's naturally, been in bands before where, he's sung and written all that kind of stuff. And I've only really done that towards the end of my solo project with Third Floor, where I was more comfortable in sitting there and actually learning to write. But now, we write and we sing on lots of stuff. And essentially how I used to do production, and I kind of still do to a point, is one of two things. For me, like instrumentally, the song should say the same message as you're trying to say when you put vocals on it. So, it sometimes it might be, a sample that you find and you're going through all these samples and you go, oh shit, that made me feel this emotion. And you go, okay, then. So if it made you feel that emotion, how can we then write the story around that? But I'll do that from an instrumental standpoint, and then the words just complement that. But it's usually kind of like based on a feeling, and those feelings then, as Cam said, you just kind of delve deeper to your experiences and able just to kind of put them on paper and make sense. And it's kind of weird. It wasn't intentional for Night Tales to be really emotive. It was something that was natural. It was something that's natural that resonated with us both. We're like, okay, we're just going to go on this tip. We're going to write about, people's emotions. We're going to write about the state of how people interact, all that kind of stuff. And it felt kind of real to us. It didn't feel kind of forced or anything. It just felt like a natural thing. And, there were times on this journey where we, were thinking about pivoting and doing stuff because it wasn't getting that traction. But like, unbeknownst to us, there was a lot of people like looking at us and all that kind of stuff because it was something different. But then also just from like, being people of color doing this, there's not many people in our industry that, write, produce from top to bottom, go out and perform, sing this color in this particular genre of music. So yeah, I feel we have a very unique offering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're right. Everything you just said is 100% true, but it is an odd thing considering, the roots of dance music and where this all came from. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, and I wanted to ask you guys, since we were talking about the King's Cross era and, when everything was a little more, I don't know, dirtier, a little more underground, a little more hipster, all that sort of thing.
Before the restrictions, you mean?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
But around that time for me, that's kind of when I was coming up as a DJ professionally. I was living in Chicago at the time, and we had, I think, an equivalent to the King's Cross scene where it was, just a lot of little clubs. There was something going on every night. And even though the scene was blowing up, it still felt like a tight-knit group of people. Like you'd see the same people out every night. And it was very diverse. It was, all different types of people, all different kinds of like races, orientations, backgrounds, everything all together. And say what you will, there's plenty of cultural critique you can give the hipster era. But to me, where I was at that time, it's kind of the only time when I've been in music when it really did feel like very open, very sort of everybody listening to everybody, influencing everybody, as close to a level playing field as I've felt in my own life was kind of that era. And then, of course, like dance music got much bigger, especially in the States, went crazy. All this money comes in, went way more mainstream. And I think, again, just speaking from personal experience, got pretty far away from that feeling I was just describing. Was it a similar thing in Australia?
For me, it's happened in two waves. I first started going out in 2006. Yes, when I was 16. Up until 2013, 2014, when like the lockout laws sort of hit. I never really saw like any type of, I never saw a lot of corporate involvement from the dance side of things. I wasn't kind of privy to that. I just wanted to make the music and create. But I've seen a second wave with a completely different genre in Australia with like the new hip hop scene that's sort of coming up. Got a lot more rappers now, a lot more hip hop producers, people that are doing like Afro beats, very culturally diverse. You're seeing them do sponsorship campaigns of like Adidas and JD Sports and mobile carriers and all these different corporations. So, I guess that's where you start to see it kind of like feel like it's a little bit filtered and there's a bit more carbon copy artists that are seeing things work for certain musicians and going, oh yeah, I can do that. Let me try and do the same.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the downfall from like, obviously, because I was part of a hospitality group at a time and we had to really pivot and change. The unfortunate thing about the lockout laws, whether you agree with them or not, and that's a whole other different topic of conversation, but it really killed the music culture in Sydney because you had all these clubs that were open until 6, 7 a.m. and a lot of these clubs could have their own musical identity. And then the lockout laws came in and you had to be inside the club at 1:30, otherwise you couldn't get back in, and the clubs would close at 3 or whatever it was. And so all these clubs were competing with other clubs, and they were just like, okay, what do people like in fucking Sydney? Oh, they like R&B and they like fucking cheesy EDM. So every club played the same shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? It just became like, even I kind of lost the passion for DJing a little bit because when I DJed on the other clubs I mentioned, I could play different sets and it was great. This was like, I had to play the same stuff all over again. Whereas Melbourne didn't have that at all. And they have a fucking super thriving cultural nightlife with all different genres of music, and it's buoyant and it's completely great. So there's always this like rivalry between Sydney and Melbourne. But then when the lockout laws came, Melbourne was definitely the destination for music.
Oh, yeah, it's also when dance music really hit its peak and was fully commercialized, like 2013, 2014. I mean, 2013 is when Ultra sold 50% of its shares to Sony. So if that gives you an indication of, you know, where dance music was going, you know?
Yeah. And it's, man, now that we're talking about this, I'm realizing, so, you know, that earlier era I was talking about, kind of when we were all coming up in our various corners, the hybridization of music was happening much more than I think it, like you said, I think it's coming back around now, but I think back then it was happening so much more, and it was very not even acceptable, but it was almost encouraged to kind of mix your style with somebody else's, try, you know, different combinations. And that was what was exciting. And then I think, as the scene started blowing up, like you said, Aaron, it's crazy. I never thought about it this way, but it's like, not only did it get more segregated, the scene got whiter and a little less interesting, but it musically too, it was like the styles were kept further apart, which I never really thought about like that. But I think that's true.
Yeah, and that's probably why, as Cam mentioned earlier on, why there was, you know, a burst of scene with like, you know, more urban music, hip hop, rap and stuff, because they had some real good content to kind of like speak about how the landscape of Sydney was and how kind of repressed it was in terms of like government regulation, all that kind of shit. And, you know, all those, every time something happens like that, you know, the same as over here with the LA riots, then, you know, it sparks off NWA. People are like talking about what they're going through and everything else. And I think that's probably, you know, what's happened in Sydney with, you know, the real kind of like repression of a lot of government decisions.
Yeah, of course. It was funny. Earlier, you were saying that, you know, the lockout laws was a whole different debate, how you feel about them. I don't think I've ever met a single person who feels positively about them.
Yeah, it is pretty dead, though. Like, this is the first time that I've been back since we moved to Ibiza. So it's the best part of 2 years. And walking around, it's just completely different. Like,
is it dead?
Yeah, it's really, really dead.
Damn.
Wow. Yeah. What was Bedouin like?
Bedouin had changed so much. So, because when we were going out, the demographic was probably like 25, even up to like 40 sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You see the old Sydney players in there, and you know, just like it was a lot older. Going back in there now, I didn't see anyone older than 24. I swear, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what? Wow. I'm like, I don't want to be in this place like this when I'm that young. I want to be raging, and like it's changed so much.
Is that kind of like reinforced the fact that you moved here? Has it reinforced the fact that you moved to LA now?
Yeah, 1,000%. Like, I'm just like, wow. And like, I mean, this is open feedback, Bedouin, if you're listening. My friend Monica, she's dope. She actually saved the night. But like these other DJs prior to rubbish, absolute garbage. This one MC, he had the mic and he was like, yeah, lick my pussy and my crack. And I'm like, why are you regurgitating at me, bro? Like, it was
you got an MC that has some OG shit, not fucking like
right.
It was unbelievably cringe. Unbelievably cringe.
Damn. I mean, did you go to Aiden's club?
No, I just went to Bedouin that night. Yeah. But the night prior, I went to Chingaling's and that was great. That was a whole vibe, a little small club, great, like eclectic mix of music. And yeah, that was fun too. So there's still like, people clinging on to hope. It's not the same size of ecosystem that there once was.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. I mean, man, you can never go back, right? Like I feel like anytime you try to go back and revisit, a period of your life that passed some years ago, it's like there's always just a weird dissonance with that, like I feel that when I go back home to visit my parents, where I used to be out, at this is in Minnesota, but in different clubs for, years of my life, like every night. And some of those places are still there, but it's just, I don't know. It's like visiting a ghost of yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, but I mean, it makes me want to ask you guys, as long as we're talking about sort of where you came from and how things have changed, the sound of Night Tales, I think listening to your discography certainly has evolved since, Move You, since the first single. And since you were talking about the fact that a lot of this, your chemistry, the sound of it just happened naturally when you guys get together at the studio, work on music. Is there at this point, do you feel like you've found the sound of Night Tales, or is it still kind of an evolving concept that's moving and changing and you're kind of on a path to somewhere undefined, if that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think that with the next run of songs, people will see a lot more identity or hear a lot more both identity in the sound, or the sounds that we're starting to create. We're kind of moving away from, the long stretching, deep progressive house type stuff. Though we really like that type of stuff. We just want to put more of ourselves in the next run of songs for sure.
Yeah, it's a bit like I use Outkast as an analogy here. So when they had their very first album, which was a Southern Playlistic Cadillac Music, it was proper like underground rap. And then you got all the way to like Love and Below, where it's just like so accessible, pop and everything else. And I think that's kind of where we're going, because we're also conscious of the fact like you can't keep regurgitating the same kind of music and the same kind of tone. There's some things that we kind of really want to tap into, like, we're a big lover of, R&B, and a lot of our next songs have got that kind of like pretty much on the nose, the sexual references, or sexy references, I should say, not sexual. But as we kind of grow and pivot, it's kind of like, you hear, when you listen to Night Tales on DSPs, Apple, Spotify, whatever, you get one experience. When you come to a show, you get this whole unique experience. Because not only we're playing live, we have this like urban hip hop pop star feel to it. So we're out in the crowd, we're engaging, we're dancing, all that kind of stuff. And also when we DJ, it's a different experience. But what we want to try and do is we want to kind of like be essentially urban pop stars of electronic music, but not exactly fall into a genre. So there might be some proggy houses, there might be some deep house stuff, there might be some more on the nose pop stuff, but it'll all be on that electronic thread. So when people come, they have this really kind of like, roller coaster of like different energies, different emotions, and along with the performances.
Yeah, I love that idea, man, because that's an idea that I think is kind of there for the taking, Like when you lay it out like that, it's almost surprising that there isn't already someone we can reference as that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you look at, obviously, Drake and Beyonce dropping like dance-centric albums recently. Clearly, it's in people's heads. There's a wave for it, but even with them, I mean, I like both of those albums for various reasons. Beyonce's in particular was crazy, but with both of them, to me, it didn't feel like, someone who has this deep love of dance music really like flexing that muscle. It more felt like, a very talented musician kind of dipping their toe into, a different style for them.
Yeah.
And so I love what you're talking about, which is more of like, this is already your thing. It's already your culture, but it's just hasn't maybe been presented in this way. Is that about right?
Yeah, definitely. And we want to kind of get to the point where it's like, that's that Night Owl sound. You know what I mean? We don't want to ever be compared to anyone ever again. That's kind of
who
we really want to leave our
compared
stand.
to. I don't know, man. I feel like you
Rufus,
guys
Rufus, and we fucking love Rufus. We love them a lot because their music's great. But I guess like there was some comparisons to it, whether it's the Australian thing or some of the sound or some of the Cam's vocals, but. It's a great compliment to have, but I don't think we're anywhere. I don't think we're anywhere near that. And we're not also mysterious like those. I mean, that's why now we've completely changed our focus, because what we found out through this kind of journey is that people have had our music in their playlists for a fucking long time, but had no idea who me and Cam were. Didn't know they were people of color. I just didn't even know. I remember our very first. When we came over and we had our first show, when we played at Electric Zoo in New York, we were in like our kind of green room and the guy was coming in and filling up some stuff. And he was like, oh, you guys rappers or anything like that. Just, obviously you assumed because of like how we look and everything else. And then we went out on stage, performed, and came back. They were like, what the fuck? You guys do that kind of music?
I even had it the other day when I was like buying my SIM card here in Australia. I was just like, oh, so what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I do music. He goes, oh, what are you, a rapper?
Dude, I don't know what I don't know what it says about, it's just like, I guess normal everyday racism, but it's like, it's so funny to me that mainstream society, it's like, we can't even imagine two kinds of black people. Like it's crazy to me. I don't know.
Yes.
Those kinds of stories to me are so that like the assumption that any black musician is a rapper it's in 2023. I don't know, man.
It's kind of weird. But a lot of our artwork before that was like our first iteration of Night Tales. There was like we had this beautiful kind of rose that symbolized whatever, but that was kind of, we just changed the colors of all the songs. And then through our releases with Ultra, we teamed up with this guy, this Dutch artist called Selvantius, who did these amazing one-hand drawings. And what he was able to take, so we do it from a sonic perspective, right? We write music and it's the message and that's how it feels. He was able to encapsulate that emotion by doing these drawings. And that was really great and everything else. But then people still know who we were. So now all the artwork moving forward is me and Cam on the front. There's more visuals of us. There's more videos, stuff like that, just getting our kind of name out there. And that's kind of now starting to connect the dots a little bit more.
That makes sense. I mean, that makes total sense. Was it the kind of thing in general? Obviously, it sounds like both you guys enjoy being on stage, being up front. Was there any reason beforehand why it was, like an art thing, a drawing thing, why it wasn't your face originally?
No, there was no sort of like, it wasn't intentional or anything like that. We just really loved the visually artistic side of music as well, where like, you could, have an album like Dark Side of the Moon that kind of, the artwork spoke to you before, you even listening to it.
Right.
But, we're also conscious of the fact that there's a bunch of people out there that look like us that, want to see themselves in a different light. And if we can be the catalyst for that, then great.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I think both perspectives are totally valid, where it's like, the first idea is, let's make it about this beautiful artistic idea. Let's not make it about, what somebody thinks when they look at my face, whatever that is. Like, let's, let the music speak for itself kind of idea. And then on the other side of it, landing on it's like, oh, no, actually, it's important that people know we're making this.
Yeah. Either way, it's getting people to think and, that's what art is all about,
Yeah. And are you guys on tour right now? Are you starting a tour soon?
We're starting a tour very, very soon. So we've got some shows at the left end of the year. So we have Art Basel in Miami in December. Then we have a show in San Diego, and then we're back to Miami for New Year's Eve. And it's the same promoters who run the festival We Belong Here, and we're playing that in February. But yeah, we've got a huge Q1 tour next year, starting like mid-Feb up until like maybe May. We have some even though we played last New Year's Eve in Portugal, this is our first like run of European shows. We have Barcelona, we have UK, some other ones we're working on. But I think it's like a 25 date kind of tour. And that'll be for our next single that comes out December 8th called Do What You Want. And you'll hear a noticeable Night Tales change. It's very sexy, it's very party, it's bringing that R&B culture back into this, and it's very fun and very playful.
I love it, man. And yeah, I just because I haven't actually said it out loud yet, the new single too, Work It Out, great. And the one I think Believe was the one before it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Believe was the one where the first time I heard it, like that to me. Not that I've been aware of your music and I like a lot of different songs of yours, but Believe to me was one where I was like, from the opening of the song, it's like, this is the perspective, this is who we are, this is the sound. I don't know. I feel like you have been zeroing in on it for a while, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Believe was definitely our first conscious dance song, if that makes sense, because if you look at the format of pretty much all the other songs, it's pretty much we do songwriter music on electronic music. So there's like verse, there's a pre, there's a hook and that kind of stuff. But this was just like, okay, then there's a message, let's say the message, and then let's just have dance groove for the rest of it.
Yeah. Right. And then that was the first time we've added a sort of what would you call it? Athletic approach? No, not athletic. We have this moment when we play that song where we ask people to literally breathe in and breathe out. It's
super
like
interactive.
It's interactive. It's like there's actually some movement to it.
And connecting the physical part of dance, because dance music is body music, right? Yeah,
that's the word. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And people seem to really gravitate towards that, to take that moment, to take a deep breath in and whatever they feel from that, whether they feel more present, maybe their drugs hit them harder, whatever it is.
I like that. I like grounding it in the physical.
Yeah, and if you get a chance, like we played on some few major festivals this year, but Bonnaroo was actually live streamed by Hulu. Nice. So you can see our full live set on YouTube, but that will give you kind of like a good reference point into like how the show has developed and evolved in terms of positioning, what we do in the show, the ebbs and flows of the different kind of energies. And that's kind of great because people have their different moments and different kind of energies. And that's why we have these different songs for different times. Like if we were, I guess it's like we played at Miami Music Week last year or whenever it was, and we were DJing there. I think we were about maybe second or third up, whatever it was. But when we DJ, we also sing. So we sing our originals. We do this like interesting Latch cover where there's a song called Talamanca by Burns, and then Cam sings Latch over it, and it's great and it's different, it's unique. The 4 or 5 DJs after that, not going to name their names or anything like that, I just couldn't tell who was playing what until Duck Sauce came on and they played disco. That was like the format change. I'm like, okay. So we're very conscientious in that when we do DJ stuff that we don't want to sound the same. And again, with our music, if it's all the same kind of vibe, then where can you really kind of go? What message can you get? What other emotions can you evoke if we're just doing the same shit?
Man,
I think we're also in a space right now where we've moved to LA and we're actually having a lot of fun, So I think that's kind of coming out in the music too.
That's good, man. Really fun's another emotion, right? Like because I think when people hear emotional, they think sad, but it's like, no, there's all kinds of emotions you can put into music, and that's fun to explore, man.
Yeah.
But Aaron, what you said too is a really good tip, because there's some up and coming producers and musicians who listen to this. As far as I think, if you get to the point where you're on a festival lineup, there's a certain pressure, whether it's something you put on yourself or somebody outside puts on you, to try to make what you do fit in on a bill like that, or to try to, even subconsciously getting influenced by just what you're hearing and you're seeing people go crazy to somebody else's set. And so the tendency, especially I think when you're starting off, is like, oh, maybe I need to change to try to do more of what they're doing so it works like what I just saw. But I think what you said, it's just a good lesson that I want to emphasize, that like actually what you need to do is the total opposite of that, because they're already doing.
That's fine too. Like if you fall short in your endeavor of trying to be like someone else, that's a lesson in itself for you to have that realization and search for your own identity.
But it's also just having like the reps. Like I said before, we never played that many live shows before we left Australia to come here. And so it's been a progress since we have more experience. Like our first proper festival in terms of like big audience was Power Norte in Mexico. And we had our own respective kind of silos, where that's now completely different. Like Cam roams the stage. I come down, do my stuff. It's more kind of interactive. We have breaks on because we had this whole thing where we wanted to be continuous and all these transitions were beautiful and everything else. It's like, people want to know who we are and have this like human interaction with people and everything else. So it's just getting the reps in. And I'm sure like when we go through this year, we're basically building a kind of like a new framing production setup. And then I'm sure by the end of the year, our live show will be completely different again, because now we're just doing our visuals properly. We've had these visuals the last 5 years that serve their purpose. Now these visuals are more intentful. And that's another kind of, another visual element along with the sonic. So yeah, it's just getting those reps in. And I'm sure kind of like, it will always evolve. It will always evolve.
Yeah.
Well, and that's part of the fun too, right? Like I get the sense that
it's also part of the headache as well.
that was kind of my question, is like, how much do you enjoy or not enjoy the chaos of it, the sort of constantly iterating?
There's always something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always something new depending on the venue or the city or what the production company has access to. So I was like, oh shit, here we go. We can prepare, we can rehearse, we can do whatever. But like, it's like Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
That's right. But I will say, I mean, maybe that's part of, all the past stuff we talked about, all those older experiences. That's experience that lets you deal with the new wrinkles, the new problems, either better or at least calmer, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. We've definitely, we're just not like, I think we're just a little less reactive, not expectant, but it's like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We're in this kind of unique space where, and this is sound like blowing our own trumpet, but I'm going to own it, is that every time we actually get the chance to perform in front of people, we make new fans. We convert pretty well. Because I think, again, they see us live, people of color, doing this, singing, performing, having a really good time. And they're like, fuck, man, these guys are cool and the music's fucking great. Let's get them back again. So for us, it's just, keep doing the music and making sure that we get out and perform in front of as many people as we can, because we know what our skill set is like. We know what our show is like, and we know that people are going to vibe it. We're not going down some like real deep, like deep techno underground or whatever it is, where people are like, oh, it's just like, it's fun, playful, emotive. You can sing along to some stuff, you can dance. So
no, I love that, man. And it's good too to have that perspective of like, this is what we want to convey, because I think even talented artists, there are plenty of talented artists who don't have the perspective or don't know how they want to present themselves. And it's a thing that doesn't always get talked about, but if you can figure that out, it's such a huge asset, Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a process of like osmosis, and like vision is everything, especially once you have the practical skill of being able to create a song that you like and that people objectively think is good. then you have to start thinking about, okay, where do I want to actually take this and how am I going to get there? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like we've got this guy that we're recruiting now, this guy called Chibs, and basically he's a stress and burnout coach. But essentially what he does, he goes into businesses or groups or organizations and gives them structure. So at the moment, there's me, Cam, our manager. We're doing our own like personal vision statements and everything else. And then once we collate all that information, then we do a unified one across, me, Cam, and our manager, and go, okay, then what's the vision? Because essentially we've pretty much winged it until this point. So now it's more intentional because, there's potential to earn lots of revenue, not only from touring, but from merch and everything else. So you need to have business skills, which is another part. It's all about music will always get you to a certain point, and that's still what we need to kind of focus on. But in terms of being a big, successful, whether you're artist or duo or band, you need to have all these other facets. So now we need that kind of structure and guidance so we can make better decisions moving forward for the sake of, the project. So these are all the things that you don't really actually know. There's no blueprint on that, like from the business side of music and all the admin side and the team side of it. It's like, yeah, you can make music till the cows come home, but if you want to be an artist and perform on the road and do all this kind of stuff, there's all these things that you kind of need to know. And we've just done that by experience, you know what I mean? So
yeah, it's like a weird, I talk about this idea a lot. It's a weird thing where being a creative, like a professional creative, you have to be two things at once. You have to be that pure creative where you're just in the moment, not overthinking anything, letting it flow. But then at the exact same time, you have to be thinking 10 steps ahead. You have to be planning everything. It's like you have to know where you're going and what it's going to look like. All
For me now, a modern day artist is very similar to fucking an MMA artist, right? Where you have to learn all the other disciplines. You don't have to be excellent in them, but you just have to learn them to kind of get ahead. And that's what you need. Like songwriting and music will always be the first port of call, but you need this and this and this and this and these other attributes.
Yeah, you got to figure out what works for you, whether that's setting aside certain days where you only do the admin stuff, or set like certain meetings. You set for the first 2 days of the week, and then these certain days that you create. They can be tricky too as a creative, because sometimes the Wednesday or the Thursday will roll around where you're meant to be creating and you're just not in that mood, or you may be a little bit burnt out from all the stuff that you've done earlier in the week. So yeah, figuring out the timing can be a little bit of a challenge. And I think we're at that point where we're kind of like our cup's pretty full on all facets of the business and the art side as well. It's just, how we're using our time is really important.
Yeah, well, I can tell you guys are inspired and stoked, man. I mean, it's an energizing conversation for me because I can tell you're super focused. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to be. And I think, like, just in context of all the other stuff, like the other stuff you have to be aware of is, like, for me, like personally, it's like, I can't believe I get paid to make and perform music for a living. Like, Cam and I have done all other jobs under the sun, worked call centers, 9 to 5, all that kind of shit. And I'm just in this position where I feel like I'm very privileged. I'm very grateful for this. Like I say, it's just, I wake up and I get to make music and plan performances and all that kind of shit. And that's, with all the good things and all the headaches that come with it, I would have those every day of the fucking week.
Of course.
100%.
Of course. Yeah, it's gratitude at the end of the day, man. And it's, when I'm at my best, that's the thing. It's like saying thank you even for the problems that pop up, Yeah,
it's just 100%.
Thank you that I even have to consider this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also, the MMA analogy, I think is pretty accurate too, because the high level MMA fighters, they got to study for years and practice for tens of thousands of hours. And they have this intellectual knowledge of all these fighting styles. And there's this real cerebral side to it. But then every once in a while, you also just have to like punch a guy in the face. It's like, it is kind of the two sides of it.
Yeah.
Man. Well, this has been great, man. I'm having a great time talking to you guys. Before we do wrap it up, is there anything else we haven't said? Anything else we should get out there? Anything else on your mind?
just know that 2024 Night Tales are coming in full force. So we're going to be everywhere. We're releasing lots of music over a very short period of time. We're going to be performing everywhere, and it's going to be a massive year. So get ready.
Amen.
Hey, I love it, man. Yeah, we don't got to go any deeper than that. and this has been great. I had a bunch of other shit I didn't even ask you guys. So sometime later, if you guys are down, let's come back and do it again. I really enjoyed this.
Enjoyed talking to you, brother. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, 100%, man. Thank you. And have a good respective evening and morning there.
And you, mate. Take care. Have a good one.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks, mate.
Bye, guys.
Peace.
Cheers.